A billionaire walks into his own home, and a hand yanks him into darkness. Before he can scream, fingers cover his mouth. A voice whispers, "Don't speak. They're planning to kill you. And your son is next." The woman holding him, his maid. The woman laughing in the next room, his fiancée discussing how to make his death look natural. Jonathan Sterling had buried one wife. He trusted again. He was wrong. But here's the twist. The only person who saw the truth was the one everyone pretended didn't exist. Before you continue, drop a comment. What city are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. Jonathan Sterling had learned to recognize silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the silence of a house settling after a long day. This was different. This silence felt like it was holding its breath. He noticed it the moment his car rolled through the gates. The driveway lights were on brighter than usual. The fountain was running, but no music drifted from the windows. No laughter. No voices. For a mansion this size, that kind of quiet meant something. Jonathan stepped out of the car and adjusted his coat. He had come home early. A meeting in Chicago had been canceled at the last minute, some issue with the other party's lawyers. A rare gift of time. He had planned to surprise Victoria. Maybe take her out to dinner. Maybe just sit with her on the terrace and watch the sunset the way they used to before the wedding planning consumed everything. 3 months together. Fast, people said. Too fast. But after losing Catherine 2 years ago, after that phone call, after the police, after standing in a hospital hallway, while a doctor said words that didn't make sense, Jonathan had learned something important. You don't wait for happiness. You grab it. You hold it. Because it can vanish in a single phone call. He pushed the front door open. That was when the hand grabbed him. It came out of nowhere. Fast. Strong. Before Jonathan could even speak, someone yanked him sideways with enough force to make him stumble. What the? A palm clamped over his mouth. He tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. He spun around and found himself staring into the wide, focused eyes of Amara Jenkins, his maid. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't talk, don't move, just listen." Jonathan's heart slammed against his ribs. He tried to speak again, but she shook her head once sharp, urgent. "Please," she said, "not a word." Before he could react, she pulled him toward the coat closet near the entrance. The door opened. Darkness swallowed them both. Amara stepped in first, dragging him with her, then eased the door shut behind them. The world narrowed to the smell of wool and leather, and the sound of his own breathing. Jonathan's mind raced. This was insane. This was his house, his home. He should be calling security. He should be demanding an explanation. But something in Amara's eyes stopped him. He had seen fear before. He had seen panic. This wasn't either. This was the look of someone who had already made a decision, someone standing in front of a fire calculating which way to run. "Listen," she whispered. And then he heard it. Voices, coming from the living room. Victoria's voice. And a man's. Jonathan froze. Through the thin crack between the door and the frame, he could see the glow of the fireplace. He could see Victoria standing near the mantel, a glass of red wine in her hand. She was smiling, but not the soft smile she used with him. This one was sharper, relaxed, confident. Beside her stood a man Jonathan recognized immediately. Marcus Webb, Victoria's old friend. The one she said was helping her coordinate charity events. The one who always seemed just a little too comfortable in Jonathan's home. The one who laughed a little too loud at Victoria's jokes and stood a little too close when he thought no one was watching. Jonathan's stomach tightened. Amara leaned closer, her lips nearly touching his ear. "They think you're still in Chicago." Jonathan said nothing. He couldn't. His throat had closed. Victoria laughed softly, that musical laugh he had fallen in love with 6 months ago. The laugh that had pulled him out of grief. The laugh that had made him believe he could be happy again. "It's already working," she said. "He's weaker than he realizes." Marcus took a sip of his drink. And the boy, Jonathan's blood turned to ice. Victoria's smile didn't fade. "Later," she said. "One thing at a time." Jonathan felt his knees buckle. The boy, Ethan, his 6-year-old son, the child who still slept with a nightlight because he was afraid of the dark, the child who still sometimes woke up crying, calling for a mother who was never coming back. Amara's hand tightened on Jonathan's arm. She was watching his face now, not the room. Victoria's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "The doctors won't notice. Small doses spread out over time. Stress, grief, overwork. It all fits the profile. No one questions a widower who collapses." Marcus nodded slowly. "And once you're married, I won't even have to wait," Victoria interrupted. "The will changes automatically. The company board follows. Everything comes to me." There was a pause. Jonathan could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "And the child?" Marcus asked again. Victoria lifted her wine glass, studying the way the light moved through the red liquid. "Accidents happen," she said. Her voice was calm, cold, like she was discussing the weather. "Children are fragile. Another tragedy, and no one will connect the dots, especially not after a grieving father's sudden heart failure." Jonathan's vision blurred. His chest felt like someone had wrapped a belt around it and was pulling tighter with every breath. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. A sick joke, a nightmare. But it wasn't. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with, was standing 20 feet away discussing his murder like it was a business transaction. Amara leaned in again. "She's been switching your medication," she whispered. "I saw it 3 weeks ago. The pills in your bathroom aren't what the labels say. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't think you'd believe me." Jonathan stared at her. A maid. A woman who cleaned his floors and washed his sheets. A woman he had probably spoken to fewer than 50 times in the year she had worked here. She had seen what he had missed. She had noticed what he had been too blind to see. Victoria lifted her glass toward Marcus. "To the future," she said. They clinked glasses. Inside the closet, Jonathan felt something shift in his chest. A dull, spreading ache. His hands began to tremble. Sweat broke out across his forehead, even though the closet was cool. Amara noticed immediately. "It's happening again, isn't it?" she whispered. "The symptoms." Jonathan nodded once. He couldn't speak. The world was starting to tilt. She reached into her apron pocket and pressed something into his palm, a small cloth, damp and cool. "Breathe into this," she said. "Slow. In through your nose, out through your mouth. The poison works faster when your heart rate spikes." Jonathan pressed the cloth to his face and forced himself to breathe. The dizziness didn't fade, but it stopped getting worse. Outside, Victoria and Marcus moved toward the kitchen, their voices growing fainter. "Shouldn't take much longer. Documentation is already prepared." No one listens to the help anyway. Then they were gone. Amara waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Only when the house fell completely silent did she crack the closet door open. "We can't stay here," she said. "If you collapse, they'll finish it tonight." Jonathan grabbed her arm. "Ethan, my son, where is he?" "Upstairs, asleep. The nanny put him to bed an hour ago." "I need to get him. I need to—" "No." Amara's voice was firm. "Not yet. If you go up there now, if they see you, if they realize you heard everything, you won't make it to morning. Neither will he." Jonathan wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to run upstairs, grab his son, and flee. But his body wouldn't cooperate. His legs felt like they were filled with sand. His vision kept darkening at the edges. "Then what?" he managed. Amara met his eyes. "You trust me." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a statement, the kind of statement that only comes from someone who has already decided what they're going to do, regardless of the answer. Jonathan looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. Amara Jenkins was 43 years old. She had worked in service her entire adult life, hotels, restaurants, private homes. She had cleaned up after people who never learned her name. She had smiled at people who looked through her like she was furniture. She had survived by being invisible. And now she was risking everything to save a man who had barely acknowledged her existence. "Why?" Jonathan asked. His voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" Amara didn't hesitate. "Because I have a son too. He's 22 now, grown. But I remember what it felt like to be the only thing standing between him and a world that didn't care if he lived or died." She paused. "And because I heard what that woman said about Ethan, about making it look like an accident." Her jaw tightened. "I've been invisible my whole life, Mr. Sterling, but I'm not blind. And I'm not going to stand by and watch a child be murdered because it's not my place to speak up." Jonathan felt something break inside him, something that had been holding together through pure denial. He had been a fool. He had been so desperate to escape his grief that he had walked straight into a trap. He had invited a predator into his home, introduced her to his son, and planned to give her his name. And the only person who had seen the truth was the woman who emptied his trash cans. "Okay," he said quietly. "I trust you." Amara nodded once. "Then follow me, and don't make a sound." She led him out of the closet and down the hallway toward the back of the house. Not the main corridor, the service passage. The one guests never saw. The one that ran behind the kitchen and connected to the staff staircase. Jonathan had walked through his own home thousands of times, but he had never used this route. He didn't even know it existed. Amara moved with certainty, her footsteps silent on the worn carpet. She knew exactly where she was going. She had cleaned every inch of this house. She knew which floorboards creaked, which doors stuck, which corners had cameras. She knew everything, because no one had ever bothered to notice her noticing. They reached the basement level. The air was cooler here, heavier. Amara guided him to a small utility room near the wine cellar and closed the door behind them. Jonathan's legs gave out. He slid down the wall, his vision tunneling. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Amara kneeling beside him, pressing the cool cloth to his forehead, her voice calm and steady. "Stay with me, Mr. Sterling. You're not dying tonight. Not on my watch." When Jonathan opened his eyes, the ceiling above him was unfamiliar. Concrete. Low. A single bare bulb hanging from a wire. His mouth was dry. His body felt like it weighed twice as much as it should. Every muscle ached. Amara sat beside him on an overturned crate, watching his face. "You collapsed," she said. "The poison is building up in your system. Your body is starting to fail." Jonathan tried to sit up. The room swayed. He waited until it steadied, then pushed himself upright against the wall. "How long was I out?" "A few hours. It's almost midnight." He looked around. They were still in the basement. The utility room. Shelves lined the walls, cleaning supplies, old boxes, forgotten equipment. "We can't stay here," he said. "I know. Victoria will notice I'm not in Chicago. She'll check. She'll realize she already believes you're dead." Jonathan stared at her. Amara pulled out her phone and showed him a news alert. The headline made his stomach drop. "Billionaire Jonathan Sterling hospitalized after sudden collapse. Fiancé reports stress-related cardiac event." "She moved fast," Amara said. "The moment she realized you weren't on the Chicago flight, she called the hospital, reported that you had collapsed at home, that she found you unresponsive." Jonathan's hands shook. "But I'm here. I'm alive." "Not according to the doctors she controls." Amara scrolled down. 2 hours ago, the hospital released an update. Complications. Critical condition." She paused. "And 20 minutes ago, this." She showed him another headline. "Breaking: Jonathan Sterling passes away from sudden cardiac failure. Widow releases statement." Jonathan couldn't breathe. "I'm dead," he whispered. "She told the world I'm dead." "Yes." He looked at Amara. "And my son. Where is Ethan? Upstairs, still in the house. Victoria is keeping him close for the cameras. The grieving stepmother comforting the orphaned child. Amara's voice hardened. But that won't last. Once the paperwork goes through, once she has full control of the estate, she'll kill him. Yes. Jonathan pressed his palms against the cold floor. His mind raced through option scenarios, escape routes. I go to the police, he said. I show them I'm alive. I tell them everything. And what evidence do you have? Amara interrupted. Your word against hers. A dead man claiming his fiancée tried to murder him. She shook her head. She has doctors in her pocket. She has lawyers. She has a story that already makes sense to everyone who reads it. Billionaire widower, overwhelmed by grief, pushes himself too hard, dies of a heart attack. Tragic, but predictable. Then what? What am I supposed to do? Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke slowly, carefully, like she had been thinking about this for a long time. You stay dead. Jonathan stared at her. If Victoria believes you're gone, she'll stop being careful, Amara continued. She'll move faster. She'll make mistakes. And when she does, we'll be ready. And Ethan? For now, he's safer if she thinks there's no one left to protect him. If you show up alive without proof, she'll accelerate everything. But if she thinks she's won, if she thinks there's no threat, Amara met his eyes. She'll get careless. And careless people talk. Jonathan wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to storm upstairs, grab his son, and run. But Amara was right. He had no evidence. He had no allies. He had nothing but the word of a dead man and the testimony of a maid no one would believe. If he wanted to save Ethan, if he wanted to stop Victoria, he had to be smart. He had to be patient. He had to be dead. How do we get out of here? He asked. Amara stood. I know a way. Staff exit. No cameras. Guard shift changes at 2 a.m. We have about 90 minutes. And then what? She pulled a small key from her pocket. I have an apartment. It's not much, but it's safe. No one knows where I live. No one ever asked. Jonathan looked at the key in her hand. A simple piece of metal. The key to a world he had never seen, the world of people like Amara, who existed in the margins, who survived by being overlooked. Why didn't you just leave? He asked. Why risk your life for me, for my son? You could have walked away, pretended you never heard anything. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Because I've been invisible my whole life, Mr. Sterling. I've watched powerful people do terrible things and get away with it because nobody believes the help. Because nobody listens to the woman who cleans the toilets. She paused. But I'm not invisible tonight. And I'm not going to let that woman hurt a child just because it's easier to stay quiet. Jonathan felt tears sting his eyes. Not from grief. Not from fear. From something else entirely. In the worst moment of his life, the only person standing between him and death was a woman he had never truly seen. And she was choosing to save him anyway. Thank you, he said. His voice broke. Amara, thank you. She nodded once. Then she extended her hand. Save the gratitude for later, she said. We're not done yet. Not even close. Jonathan took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. Outside the mansion, the night was dark and quiet. Inside, Victoria was probably already planning the funeral, picking out flowers, rehearsing her tears. She thought she had won. She was wrong. Jonathan Sterling was dead to the world, but he was very much alive, and he was just getting started. They moved through the darkness like ghosts. Amara led Jonathan down a narrow corridor he had never seen before, a service passage that ran behind the kitchen, past the laundry room, and down to a door that opened onto the back of the property. No cameras, no guards, just shadows and silence. Jonathan's legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Every step sent a wave of dizziness through his skull. The poison was still working, still eating away at him from the inside. but he kept moving. He had no choice. Amara checked her watch. Guard shift changes in 4 minutes. We go through the east gate. There's a gap in the fence line near the gardener's shed. I found it 6 months ago when I was taking out the recycling. Jonathan almost laughed. 6 months. She had known about that gap for 6 months. She had memorized every weakness in his security system, every blind spot, every vulnerability. Not because she was planning anything, but because that's what survival looked like for people like her. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About Victoria. About the poison. How did you figure it out?" Amara didn't slow down. "I didn't figure it out. I saw it." "Saw what?" 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning the master bathroom. You were at work. Victoria was supposed to be at a charity luncheon, but she came back early. I heard her in the hallway, so I stepped into the linen closet to wait until she passed. She paused at a corner, listened, then continued. "She didn't pass. She went into your bathroom. I heard her open the medicine cabinet. I heard her take out a bottle, your heart medication, and I heard her open something else, something she brought with her. I watched through the crack in the door." Jonathan's stomach turned. "She emptied your pills into the toilet. Then she refilled the bottle from her own container. Same color, same size, different contents." Amara's voice was flat factual. She washed her hands, checked her reflection in the mirror, and smiled. Then she left. "And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me?" The question hit harder than Jonathan expected. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe that he would have listened, that he would have taken the word of his maid over the woman he loved. But he knew the truth. He wouldn't have believed her. He would have thought she was confused or jealous or trying to cause trouble. He would have dismissed her the way he had dismissed everyone who existed beneath his notice. "No," he admitted. "I wouldn't have." Amara nodded. "That's why I waited. I needed proof. I needed you to hear it yourself." They reached the east gate. Amara pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and clicked it twice. A signal Jonathan didn't understand. 30 seconds later, the gate buzzed softly and swung open. Jonathan stared at her. "How did you—" "Marcus isn't the only one with friends on the staff," Amara said. "The night guard's name is Raymond. His daughter goes to the same church as my sister. I asked him for a favor. He didn't ask questions." They slipped through the gate and into the trees beyond. The mansion disappeared behind them, swallowed by darkness. Jonathan looked back once. His home. His life. Everything he had built. It all felt like a lie now. A beautiful, elaborate trap that he had walked into willingly because he was too desperate for happiness to see the teeth. Amara's car was parked a quarter-mile away, tucked behind an abandoned service station. An old Honda Civic, dented and faded, with a cracked windshield and seats that smelled like cleaning supplies. Jonathan had never ridden in a car this small. He folded himself into the passenger seat and watched Amara start the engine. "Where are we going?" "My place. East side of the city. About 40 minutes if traffic is clear." She pulled onto the road. The street lights cast orange streaks across the windshield. Jonathan closed his eyes. His head was pounding. His chest felt tight. Every heartbeat reminded him that he was still alive, but only barely. "The poison," he said. "How do I get it out of my system?" "Time, water, rest." The doses were small enough to avoid detection. "That means they're small enough to metabolize if you stop taking them." Amara glanced at him. "You're going to feel like hell for the next few days, maybe a week, but you'll live. And if I don't, then I'll have risked everything for nothing." Her voice didn't waver. "But you're not going to die, Mr. Sterling. I didn't drag you out of that closet just to watch you give up in my passenger seat." Jonathan opened his eyes and looked at her. The streetlights painted her face in alternating strips of light and shadow. She looked tired, determined, scared, but she kept driving. "Why do you keep calling me that?" he asked. "Mr. Sterling. Like I'm still your employer. Amara's hands tightened on the wheel. Because you are. Because that's the only relationship we have. I don't know you, Mr. Sterling. I know your house. I know your schedule. I know what kind of soap you use and what time you take your coffee. But I don't know you. And you sure as hell don't know me. Then why are you doing this? She was quiet for a long moment. The highway stretched ahead of them, empty and dark. Because I had a son once, she finally said. His name was Marcus. Not like the man in your house, different Marcus. My Marcus. He was 7 years old when his father left. Just me and him against the world. Jonathan watched her face. I worked 3 jobs to keep him fed. Cleaned houses during the day, waited tables at night, did laundry on weekends. I was never home. I was always tired. But I kept telling myself it would be worth it. That I was building something. That one day things would be different. She took a breath. When Marcus was 17, he got involved with some bad people. I didn't know. I was too busy working to notice. By the time I found out, it was too late. He was in jail, armed robbery. He's still there, 22 years old, and he's been behind bars for 5 years because I wasn't paying attention. Jonathan didn't know what to say. That's why I notice things now, Amara continued. That's why I watch. That's why I listen. Because I learned the hard way that the moment you stop paying attention is the moment everything falls apart. She glanced at him. When I heard that woman talking about your son, about making it look like an accident, I thought about my Marcus. I thought about what I would give to go back and protect him from the things I didn't see coming. Her voice hardened. I can't save my son, but maybe I can save yours. Jonathan felt something shift in his chest. Not the poison this time, something deeper. Something that had been frozen for 2 years since the night Catherine died. Grief. Guilt. Gratitude. Thank you, he said. It felt inadequate. It felt like nothing. But it was all he had. Amara nodded once and kept driving. They reached her apartment just before 3 in the morning. It was a small building in a neighborhood Jonathan had never visited. Working-class modest, the kind of place where people kept to themselves and didn't ask questions. Amara's unit was on the 2nd floor. 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The furniture was old but clean. Everything was organized with the precision of someone who had learned to survive in small spaces. Jonathan sat on the couch while Amara brought him water and a handful of vitamins. No medication, she said. Nothing from a bottle you didn't open yourself. These are mine. I've been taking them for years. They're clean. He swallowed them without argument. Now what? He asked. Amara sat across from him on a wooden chair. Now we wait. Victoria thinks you're dead. She's going to move fast, take control of the company, lock down the estate, position herself as the grieving widow. While she's doing that, she's going to get careless. She's going to say things, do things, make mistakes. And we document everything. Yes. I go back to the mansion tomorrow. Tell them I heard about your death and wanted to offer my condolences. They'll let me in. They always do. Nobody notices the help. Jonathan shook his head. That's too dangerous. If she suspects... She won't suspect me. She doesn't see me. She never has. Amara's voice was calm, certain. I've been invisible my whole life, Mr. Sterling. For once, that's going to work in my favor. Jonathan wanted to argue, but he was too weak, too tired, too overwhelmed. He leaned back on the couch and closed his eyes. Get some rest, Amara said. Tomorrow the real work begins. The next 3 days were the longest of Jonathan's life. He couldn't leave the apartment. He couldn't call anyone. He couldn't do anything except watch the news and feel his body slowly fighting off the poison. Victoria was everywhere. She gave interviews. She released statements. She appeared at press conferences with tears in her eyes and Ethan's hand clasped in hers. She spoke about Jonathan's legacy, his vision, his dedication to philanthropy. She lied with the ease of someone who had been practicing her whole life. Jonathan watched every appearance with a mixture of rage and helplessness. His son looked smaller on screen, quieter. Ethan stood beside Victoria like a prop, his eyes darting nervously whenever she touched him. He knows something is wrong, Jonathan thought. He doesn't understand it yet, but he feels it. Amara reported back every evening. "She's already filed the paperwork for the estate," Amara said on the second night. "Full control, no probate delays. The lawyers she's using, they're fast. Too fast, like they were prepared." "She's been planning this for months," Jonathan said. "At least, maybe longer." Amara pulled out her phone and showed him a photograph. "I found this in her private office, a calendar. She had dates marked 3 months ago, dates that correspond to your scheduled business trips. She was tracking your absences." Jonathan stared at the image, his own life reduced to a spreadsheet of opportunities. "What about Ethan?" he asked. "How is he?" Amara hesitated. "Tell me." "He's not eating. The nanny says he wakes up crying every night. He keeps asking for you." She paused. "Victoria told him you went to heaven to be with his mother. He didn't believe her. He told the nanny that you promised you would never leave." Jonathan's throat closed. "He knows," Jonathan said. "Somehow he knows something is wrong. Kids are smart, smarter than adults give them credit for." Amara sat down across from him. "But we have to be careful. If we move too fast, if Victoria realizes you're alive before we have proof, she'll accelerate the plan for Ethan." "Yes." Jonathan pressed his palms against his eyes. Every instinct screamed at him to storm the mansion, grab his son and run. But Amara was right. Without evidence, without witnesses, without something concrete, he was just a dead man with a conspiracy theory. "The gala," he said suddenly. "The memorial gala. When is it?" Amara's eyes narrowed. 10 days from now. Victoria announced it yesterday. A tribute to your legacy. Major donors, press coverage, the whole show. That's our window." "What do you mean?" Jonathan sat forward. "Victoria is arrogant. She thinks she's won. At the gala, she'll be surrounded by people who admire her, who believe her story. She'll feel invincible." "And invincible people make mistakes," Amara finished. "Exactly. If we can get proof before the gala documents recording something irrefutable, we can expose her in front of everyone. In front of the press, the board, the donors. No lawyers to spin it. No time to prepare a defense. Just the truth in real time." Amara was quiet for a moment. "That's a big risk. If it goes wrong, then my son dies," Jonathan said, "and Victoria wins. But if we don't try, the outcome is the same. At least this way we have a chance." Amara studied his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her. "Okay," she said. "Then we need proof, and I know where to find it." She went back to the mansion the next day. Jonathan waited in the apartment counting the minutes. Every hour felt like a year. He paced, he checked his phone, he watched the door like it might disappear if he looked away. When Amara finally returned that evening, she was carrying a small bag and wearing an expression Jonathan had never seen before. "I got something," she said. She pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten notes, guard schedules, camera locations, staff rotations, names, dates, times. "I've been compiling this for weeks," she explained. "Every time I cleaned a room, I noticed something. Every time I passed a door, I listened. Victoria keeps her most important documents in the office safe, the one behind your painting." "I know that safe," Jonathan said. "The combination is changed. She changed it the day after you died, but I watched her open it yesterday. I memorized the new code." Jonathan stared at her. "How?" "I was dusting the bookshelf behind her. She didn't close the door all the way. She didn't think she needed to." A faint smile crossed Amara's face. "Nobody notices the help." "What's in the safe?" "Documents. Medical records. Prescriptions that don't match what the pharmacy actually dispensed. And something else." She paused. A vial. Small. Clear liquid. No label. Jonathan's blood went cold. The poison. I think so. If we can get that vial, if we can have it tested, we'll have proof that goes beyond words. Physical evidence. Something even her lawyers can't explain away. We need a recording too, Jonathan said. Her voice. Her confession. Something that connects her directly to the plan. Amara nodded. That's the hard part. She's careful when she talks. Most of the time at least. But Marcus is different. When they're together, when they think they're alone, they get comfortable. They say things they shouldn't. Then we need them together. We need them talking. The gala, Amara said. They'll both be there. Celebrating, drinking, feeling safe. She met Jonathan's eyes. That's when we move. Jonathan felt something he hadn't felt in days. Something that cut through the weakness and the fear and the helplessness. Hope. It was fragile, dangerous, possibly foolish, but it was there. How do we do this? He asked. Walk me through it. Amara spread her notes across the coffee table. For the next 2 hours they planned, every detail, every contingency, every possible failure point. She would return to the mansion on the night of the gala. She would wear her old uniform, the one she still kept in the back of her closet. She would blend in with the service staff, invisible as always. During the event, she would slip into the office. She would open the safe. She would photograph the documents, take the vial, and plant a recording device. Then she would wait. When Victoria and Marcus inevitably retreated to the office to celebrate, to gloat, to toast their success, Amara would capture every word, and Jonathan would be waiting. Not in the shadows this time, not as a ghost. He would walk through the front door of his own home and watch the woman who tried to murder him realize that the dead don't always stay buried. It's insane, Jonathan said when they finished planning. You know that, right? This whole thing is insane. Yes, Amara agreed. But so is letting a child be murdered because his stepmother wanted his inheritance. She began gathering her notes. There's one more thing, she said. Something I haven't told you. Jonathan tensed. What? Amara reached into her bag and pulled out a small phone. Old model, prepaid, untraceable. I have a friend at the hospital, a nurse. She owed me a favor from a long time ago. Amara set the phone on the table. She accessed your medical records. The ones Victoria's doctors filed. They don't match. The symptoms they documented aren't consistent with cardiac failure. They're consistent with chronic poisoning. Jonathan picked up the phone. On the screen was a photograph of a medical chart. His name at the top. Columns of data he didn't fully understand. This is evidence, he said slowly. Real evidence. It's a start, but it's not enough on its own. Medical records can be disputed. Experts can be hired to contradict experts. We need the vial. We need the recording. We need all of it together in one undeniable package. Jonathan nodded. The gala. The gala. She stood and moved toward the door. Where are you going? Jonathan asked. Back to work. She looked at him over her shoulder. Victoria has a dress fitting tomorrow. She wants the house clean top to bottom before the event. I volunteered to lead the crew. You volunteered? Of course. Nobody suspects the help who shows up early and stays late. A small smile crossed her face. Get some rest, Mr. Sterling. You're going to need your strength. She opened the door, then paused. One more thing. What? When this is over, when Victoria is exposed and your son is safe, don't forget what you learned these past few days. Jonathan frowned. What do you mean? Amara turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. You built a life surrounded by people who called themselves friends, advisors, lovers, partners, and not one of them saw what I saw. Not one of them tried to protect you. She paused. The people closest to you, they were the ones holding the knife. The only person who tried to save you was someone you never even bothered to learn the name of. Jonathan felt the words land like punches. "I knew your name," he said weakly. "Did you?" Amara asked. "Or did you just know that someone cleaned your house?" She didn't wait for an answer. The door closed behind her, and Jonathan was alone. He sat in the silence of her small apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life he had never noticed: photographs on the walls, books on the shelves, a prayer card tucked into the corner of a mirror. Amara Jenkins had a whole world that existed beyond his awareness. A son in prison, a sister at church, a network of favors and friendships built over decades of being overlooked. She had saved his life, and until 3 days ago, he hadn't even known she existed. Jonathan picked up the phone with the medical records and stared at the screen. His own name looked foreign to him now, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who had died in that mansion and was slowly being replaced by someone new. He didn't know who he would be when this was over. But he knew one thing for certain. He would never ignore the invisible again. The days leading up to the gala passed in a blur of preparation and paranoia. Jonathan spent hours studying the layout of his own home through Amara's hand-drawn maps. He memorized guard positions, camera angles, escape routes. He practiced walking without the weakness that still plagued his legs. He forced himself to eat even when his stomach rejected everything. The poison was leaving his system slowly, painfully. Some mornings he woke up drenched in sweat, his heart racing from nightmares he couldn't remember. Other mornings he felt almost normal, strong enough to believe he might actually survive what was coming. Amara came and went like a shadow, bringing updates from the mansion. Victoria ordered 300 white roses for the ballroom. She reported on the 4th day. She wants everything perfect. She keeps telling the staff that Jonathan would have wanted a celebration of life, not a funeral. "She's enjoying this," Jonathan said. "She's performing. There's a difference." Amara set a bag of groceries on the counter. Performers need an audience. Take away the audience, and they fall apart. On the 6th day, she brought news about Ethan. "He's getting worse," Amara said quietly. "The nanny told me he hasn't slept through the night since you died. He keeps drawing pictures of you. Victoria found one yesterday and tore it up in front of him." Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. She did what? She told him it was unhealthy to dwell on the past, that he needed to move forward, that she was his family now. Amara paused. He didn't cry. He just looked at her with this expression, like he was memorizing her face, like he was storing it somewhere for later. He's 6 years old. 6-year-olds understand more than adults think. He knows something is wrong. He just doesn't have the words for it yet. Jonathan stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city carried on with its business, indifferent to the war being fought in this small apartment. Cars passed. People walked. Life continued. His son was trapped in a house with a woman who planned to kill him, and there was nothing Jonathan could do about it. Not yet. Not until they had proof. 3 more days, Amara said, reading his thoughts. 3 more days, and we end this. 3 more days, Jonathan repeated. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like nothing at all. On the 8th day, Amara brought the recording device. It was small, no bigger than a button. She had purchased it with cash from a store across town, paid a teenager to buy it so her face wouldn't be on any cameras. It activates with a single press, she explained, demonstrating. Records for up to 6 hours. The microphone is sensitive enough to pick up whispers from across a room. Where will you hide it? The office, behind the bookshelf. There's a gap between the wood and the wall. I've been dusting around it for a year. No one will find it. Jonathan turned the device over in his hands. Such a small thing. Such enormous consequences. What if they don't talk? He asked. What if they're careful? They won't be careful. Not tomorrow night. Tomorrow night they'll be celebrating. They'll be drinking. They'll be surrounded by people telling them how brave and strong Victoria is. Amara took the device back and slipped it into her pocket. Arrogance is a drug, Mr. Sterling, and tomorrow Victoria is going to overdose. The night before the gala, neither of them slept. Jonathan sat on the couch reviewing the plan for the 100th time. Every step, every contingency, every possible point of failure. Amara sat across from him, cleaning her fingernails with a methodical focus that seemed almost meditative. "Are you scared?" Jonathan asked. She looked up. "Of what?" "Getting caught, being blamed, going to prison for helping a dead man come back to life." Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she set down her nail file and folded her hands in her lap. "I've been scared my whole life," she said. "Scared of losing my job, scared of not making rent, scared of what would happen to my son if I wasn't there to protect him." She paused. "But this is different. This isn't fear. This is purpose." Purpose. For 43 years, I've watched powerful people do whatever they want. I've cleaned up their messes. I've smiled at their jokes. I've pretended not to hear the things they say when they think no one is listening. Her voice hardened. "Tomorrow I stop pretending. Tomorrow I make them listen to me." Jonathan studied her face. The determination there. The quiet fury. "You could have had a different life," he said. "If things had been different. If you'd had the opportunities." "Don't," Amara interrupted. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Feel sorry for me. Wonder what I could have been if the world had been kinder." She shook her head. "I am exactly who I'm supposed to be. Every job I've worked, every house I've cleaned, every moment of being invisible, it all led me here. To this apartment, to this night, to you." She leaned forward. "I don't need your pity, Mr. Sterling. I need you to be ready. Because tomorrow you're going to walk into that mansion and face the woman who tried to murder you. And when you do, you can't hesitate. You can't waver. You have to look her in the eye and show her that she failed." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I'm ready." "Are you?" "Because once we start this, there's no going back. If we fail, Victoria wins. Your son dies. And I spend the rest of my life in prison for conspiracy and kidnapping." "We won't fail." Amara held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Get some sleep," she said. "Tomorrow changes everything." But Jonathan didn't sleep. He lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, thinking about Catherine, his first wife, the love of his life, the woman who had given him Ethan and then been taken away in an instant. He remembered the night she died, the phone call from the hospital, the drive through empty streets, his hands shaking on the wheel, the doctor's face when Jonathan burst through the emergency room doors, that expression of professional sympathy that told him everything before a single word was spoken. She was gone. Just like that. One moment, she was alive, making dinner plans and scheduling Ethan's soccer practice. The next moment, she was a body on a table, a death certificate, a casket lowered into the ground. Jonathan had spent 2 years drowning in that grief. He had thrown himself into work because it was the only thing that made the pain stop. He had neglected his son, his friends, his own health, all in the name of survival. And then Victoria appeared. She was beautiful, charming, understanding. She listened when he talked about Catherine. She held his hand when he cried. She made him believe that happiness was possible again. It was all a lie. Every smile, every touch, every whispered promise. She had studied him like a mark. She had identified his weaknesses and exploited them with surgical precision. She had made him love her while she was planning his death. Jonathan closed his eyes and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had mourned Catherine with tears. He would mourn Victoria with justice. Tomorrow the performance ended. The day of the gala dawned gray and cold. Amara left early, dressed in her old uniform, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a loyal servant returning to help in a time of need. "I'll be inside by 9, she said at the door. "The caterers arrive at noon. Guests at 7. Victoria's speech is scheduled for 9:30. That's when she and Marcus will retreat to the office to celebrate away from the crowd." And I arrive at 10. Not a minute before. You need to give me time to get the recording. If you walk in too early before they've said anything incriminating... I know, I've been over this 1,000 times. Amara nodded. One more thing. When you walk through that door, don't look for me. Don't acknowledge me. Don't give any sign that we know each other. If this goes wrong, I need to be able to disappear. It won't go wrong. But if it does... Jonathan met her eyes. If it does, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. I'll make sure your name is remembered. Something flickered across Amara's face. Surprise maybe, or gratitude. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual mask of calm determination. Don't get sentimental on me now, Mr. Sterling. Save it for after we win. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Amara? She paused. Thank you, Jonathan said, for everything. She nodded once, then disappeared down the stairs. Jonathan was alone. He spent the day preparing. He showered, shaved, dressed in the suit Amara had brought him 3 days ago. A simple black ensemble, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention before he wanted it. He practiced what he would say. He rehearsed the moment of confrontation in his mind over and over until the words felt natural. At 6 o'clock, he ate a small meal. At 7, he watched the news coverage of guests arriving at the Sterling mansion. At 8, he received a text from an unknown number. Inside. Safe. Recording in place. Jonathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. At 9 o'clock, he left the apartment. The drive to the mansion took 40 minutes. Jonathan used a rental car paid for in cash, arranged through a friend of Amara's who didn't ask questions. He parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, his heart pounding with every step. The mansion was lit up like a beacon. Music drifted across the lawn. Luxury cars lined the driveway, their drivers waiting patiently in the cold. Jonathan stood at the edge of the property, watching shadows move behind the windows. Somewhere in there, his son was sleeping. Somewhere in there, Victoria was accepting condolences and counting her inheritance. Somewhere in there, Amara was waiting. He checked his watch. 9:45. Any minute now, Victoria would excuse herself from the crowd. She would find Marcus. They would retreat to the office, pour themselves drinks, and toast to their success. And they would talk. They would say things they believed no one would ever hear. They would confess their crimes to each other in the privacy of what they thought was a secure room. They were wrong. At 9:52, Jonathan's phone buzzed. They're in the office. Moving now. He took a deep breath. Then another. This was it. He walked toward the front door. The guards didn't recognize him at first. Why would they? Jonathan Sterling was dead. Jonathan Sterling was a photograph on the memorial screen inside. Jonathan Sterling was a memory, a legacy, a cautionary tale about working too hard. But one of the guards, an older man named Thomas, who had worked for the family for 12 years, looked twice. Looked again. His face went pale. Mr. Sterling. Jonathan didn't stop. Thomas, good to see you. He pushed through the door before anyone could react. The foyer was crowded with guests, donors, board members, social climbers dressed in black and silver. They were laughing, drinking, celebrating the life of a man they barely knew. Jonathan walked past them. Someone gasped. He kept walking. A woman screamed. He didn't look back. The crowd parted before him like water whispers, spreading faster than he could move. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. But Jonathan didn't slow down. He had one destination, one purpose. The office. He reached the door just as it swung open. Victoria stood in the doorway, a glass of champagne in her hand, her face frozen in an expression of polished grief. Marcus was behind her. His tie loosened, his cheeks flushed with alcohol. For one perfect moment, nobody moved. Then Victoria's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Jonathan. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her face had gone white. Her eyes, those beautiful lying eyes, were wide with something Jonathan had never seen in them before. Fear. Real, genuine, uncontrollable fear. Hello, Victoria, Jonathan said. His voice was steady, calm. "You look surprised to see me." She stumbled backward. Marcus caught her arm. "This is impossible," Victoria breathed. "You're dead. You're dead." "Yes, that was the plan, wasn't it?" Jonathan stepped forward. "Small doses, spread out over time. Make it look like stress. Make it look like grief." He tilted his head. "Did you really think no one would notice?" Victoria's mask cracked further. She looked at Marcus, then back at Jonathan, her mind visibly racing. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "You were sick. The doctors said—" "The doctors you paid. The ones who falsified my medical records." Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial. The one Amara had taken from the safe. "Is this what they used? This poison that was supposed to kill me?" Victoria's eyes locked onto the vial. Her throat moved as she swallowed. "Where did you get that?" "Funny thing about mansions this big?" Jonathan said. "There are a lot of places to hide. A lot of corners no one thinks to check. A lot of people no one thinks to notice." From the shadows behind the staircase, Amara stepped forward. Victoria's face twisted with recognition. "You, the maid." "My name is Amara," she said quietly, "and I've been listening to you for a very long time." Victoria's composure shattered completely. She spun toward Marcus. "Do something." But Marcus was already backing away, his face pale, his hands raised. This wasn't Victoria. You said no one would find out." "Shut up." "She said it would be easy." Marcus continued, his voice rising. "She said the doctors were taking care of the lawyers, everything." I said shut up, but it was too late. The crowd had gathered behind Jonathan. Dozens of faces watching, listening, recording. Every word Marcus said was being captured by 100 phones. Jonathan smiled. "You know what I always admired about you, Victoria? Your confidence. Your absolute certainty that you were the smartest person in the room." He stepped closer. "But here's the thing about smart people. They always underestimate the ones they think are beneath them." He gestured toward Amara. "This woman, the one you called invisible, irrelevant, disposable, she saw what no one else saw. She heard what no one else heard. And she saved my life while you were planning my funeral." Victoria's breathing was ragged now. Her carefully constructed persona was falling apart in real time. "You can't prove anything," she said. "It's your word against mine. A dead man and a maid against—" "Against what?" Amara interrupted. She held up her phone. "Against this." She pressed play. Victoria's own voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "The poison worked exactly as planned. Doctors signed off. Everything's mine now." Then Marcus's voice. "And the boy, and Victoria again, cold and casual. Children are fragile. Another accident and no one will connect the dots." The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, accusations. Someone called for security. Someone else called for the police. Victoria lunged toward Amara, her face twisted with rage. "Give me that phone!" But Jonathan stepped between them. "You wanted my money," he said quietly. "You wanted my company. You wanted my name." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "But you made one mistake, Victoria. You forgot about my son, and there is nothing on this earth I won't do to protect him." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, not grief, not remorse, but fury. Pure, impotent fury. "You should have died," she hissed. "You were supposed to die." "I know," Jonathan said, "but someone refused to let that happen." He turned to the crowd. "This woman, Amara Jenkins, risked everything to save my life and my son's life. She had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And she did it anyway because it was the right thing to do." He looked at Amara. "I spent years surrounded by people who called themselves friends, advisors, partners, and not one of them saw the truth. Not one of them tried to protect me." He paused. The only person who did was the woman everyone pretended didn't exist. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Victoria tried to run. She made it 3 steps before security grabbed her arms. "Let go of me. This is my house. I'm the widow of Jonathan Sterling." "No," Jonathan said. "You're the woman who tried to murder Jonathan Sterling, and you're under arrest." Marcus didn't even try to run. He stood frozen, his face gray, his hands shaking. "I didn't know," he stammered, as officers approached him. "She said she told me it was just about the money. I didn't know about the kid." "Save it for your lawyer," one of the officers said, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Victoria screamed as they dragged her toward the door. She screamed about conspiracies and frame-ups and how everyone would pay. She screamed until the officers put her in the back of a patrol car and closed the door. Then there was silence. Jonathan stood in the middle of his own foyer, surrounded by the wreckage of his life. Broken glass, spilled champagne, the echoes of a plan that had almost succeeded. But he wasn't looking at any of it. He was looking at Amara. She stood by the staircase. Her uniform rumpled her hair coming loose from its bun. She looked exhausted, relieved. And something else. Something Jonathan couldn't quite name. "It's over," he said. "Is it moi? The hard part, at least." Amara shook her head slowly. "The hard part is just beginning, Mr. Sterling. Tomorrow the lawyers will come, the reporters, the board members wanting answers." She paused. "And somewhere in this house, a 6-year-old boy is going to wake up and find out his father isn't dead after all." Jonathan felt his chest tighten. Ethan. He had been so focused on survival, on justice, on stopping Victoria, he hadn't let himself think about what came next. How do you explain to a child that you were never really gone? How do you undo the damage of watching his stepmother dragged away in handcuffs? How do you rebuild a life that was built on lies? "I don't know how to do this," Jonathan admitted. Amara almost smiled. "Nobody does. You just figure it out as you go." She turned toward the back of the house, toward the servants' quarters. She knew better than he did. "Amara." She stopped. "Where are you going?" "Home. My job here is finished." "Your job?" Jonathan walked toward her. "You think this was just a job? You think you can save my life and then just disappear?" "That's what people like me do, Mr. Sterling. We show up, we do what needs to be done, and then we fade back into the background so people like you can take the credit." "Not this time." Amara turned to face him. "What are you saying?" Jonathan took a breath. "I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I'm paying attention. I'm seeing the people I should have seen all along, and I'm not going to let you walk away like you don't matter." Amara's expression was unreadable. "You have a son in prison," Jonathan continued. "Marcus, you told me about him, about how you weren't there when he needed you. That's not your business." "Maybe not, but I have lawyers, good ones, the best in the country." He paused. "Let me help." Amara's jaw tightened. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's debt. I owe you my life. I owe you my son's life. And I don't know how to repay that, but I'm going to try." He extended his hand. "Let me try." Amara stared at his hand for a long moment. Behind them, the mansion was still in chaos. Officers were taking statements. Guests were whispering. The media would arrive any minute. But in this small corner of the foyer, time seemed to stop. Finally, Amara reached out and took his hand. "Don't make me regret this," she said. "I won't." She held his grip for a moment longer. Then she released it and stepped back. "Go find your son, Mr. Sterling. He needs his father." Jonathan nodded. He turned toward the staircase that led to the bedrooms, toward Ethan, toward whatever came next. Behind him, Amara Jenkins watched him go. And for the first time in 43 years, she didn't feel invisible. Jonathan climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not from exhaustion, though his body still carried the weight of everything it had endured, but from something else. Something he couldn't name. Fear, maybe. Or anticipation. Or the strange disorienting sensation of walking back into a life he had already said goodbye to. The hallway was dark. The nanny had turned off most of the lights hours ago following the evening routine that had existed long before Victoria ever set foot in this house. Bath time at 7. Story time at 7:30. Lights out by 8. Ethan's room was at the end of the hall. The door was closed, but a thin strip of light glowed beneath it. The night light. The one Ethan had used since he was 3. The one Catherine had picked out at a store in Boston, laughing at how seriously their son took the decision between rocket ships and dinosaurs. He chose dinosaurs. Jonathan stopped outside the door. His hand hovered over the handle. What was he supposed to say? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that you weren't really dead? That the woman who tucked him in at night had been planning to hurt him? That the world was full of people who lied and cheated and betrayed the ones who trusted them? You don't. Jonathan realized. You don't explain any of it. You just hold him and let him know you're there. He opened the door. Ethan was sitting up in bed, his dinosaur nightlight casting soft green shadows across the wall. His eyes were open. He wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. Daddy. The word came out small, tentative, like Ethan wasn't sure if he was dreaming. Jonathan's throat closed. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Daddy, is that you? Jonathan crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to his knees beside the bed. He pulled Ethan into his arms and held him so tight that neither of them could breathe. It's me, Jonathan whispered. I'm here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere. Ethan didn't cry. Not at first. He just held on his small fingers, gripping Jonathan's shirt like he was afraid his father might disappear again. They said you went to heaven, Ethan whispered. They said you went to be with Mommy. I know what they said. But I didn't believe them. Ethan pulled back just enough to look at Jonathan's face. His eyes were wet now, tears starting to fall. I knew you wouldn't leave me. You promised. You promised you would always be here. Jonathan felt his heart shatter and rebuild in the same moment. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But I'm back now. And I promise on everything I have, I will never leave you again. Ethan buried his face in Jonathan's chest and finally let himself cry. They stayed like that for a long time. Jonathan didn't count the minutes. He just held his son and let the boy's tears soak through his shirt, feeling each sob like a physical blow. This was his fault. All of it. He had been so desperate to escape his grief that he had brought a monster into their home. He had trusted the wrong person, ignored the warning signs, and almost gotten his son killed. No amount of justice could undo that. No amount of revenge could erase the trauma Ethan had experienced. But Jonathan could be here now. He could hold his son through the nightmares that were coming. He could rebuild their lives one day at a time and prove that some promises were worth keeping. Daddy, yeah, buddy, is the bad lady gone? Jonathan pulled back and looked at his son's face. Tear-streaked, exhausted, but with a clarity in his eyes that seemed far too old for a 6-year-old. Yes, Jonathan said. The bad lady is gone. She's never coming back. Good. Ethan wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I didn't like her. She smiled wrong. Jonathan almost laughed. Out of everything, the poison, the conspiracy, the elaborate web of lies, his 6-year-old son had seen the truth from the beginning. She smiled wrong. You're right, Jonathan said. She did smile wrong, and I should have listened to you. Ethan nodded seriously. You should always listen to me. I'm very smart. This time Jonathan did laugh. A real laugh, the first one in weeks. It felt foreign in his chest, like a muscle he had forgotten how to use. You are very smart, he agreed. The smartest person I know. Ethan's expression shifted. He looked toward the door, then back at Jonathan. Who was the lady who helped you? The one who cleans the house. Jonathan felt his throat tighten again. Her name is Amara. She's the reason I'm here. She was nice to me, Ethan said quietly. When the bad lady yelled at me, the cleaning lady gave me cookies and told me everything would be okay. She said my daddy was watching over me, even if I couldn't see him. Jonathan closed his eyes. Amara had been protecting Ethan, even when Jonathan couldn't. She had been holding his son together while the world fell apart around them. She's a good person, Jonathan said. One of the best people I've ever met. Can she come back? Can she still clean the house? Jonathan smiled. I think she might have a bigger job than that now. But we'll see her again. I promise. Ethan seemed satisfied with that answer. He yawned, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion, now that the fear had been replaced by something safer. Will you stay with me tonight? He asked. I don't want to be alone. I'll stay with you every night, Jonathan said. As long as you want. He climbed into the small bed beside his son, his feet hanging off the edge, his back pressed against the wall. It was uncomfortable. It was cramped. It was the most peaceful he had felt in months. Ethan curled against his side and closed his eyes. Within minutes, the boy was asleep. Jonathan stayed awake listening to his son breathe, watching the shadows move across the ceiling. Tomorrow, the world would demand answers. Lawyers, reporters, board members, they would all want a piece of him. They would want to know how he had survived, who had helped him, what he planned to do next. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was just a father holding his son. And for the first time in 2 years, that was enough. The next morning arrived with chaos. Jonathan woke to the sound of voices downstairs, dozens of them it seemed, and the insistent buzz of his phone, which had been charging on Ethan's nightstand. He checked the screen. 47 missed calls. Over 200 text messages. 300 emails. The world had discovered that Jonathan Sterling was alive. He left Ethan sleeping and went downstairs to face what was waiting. The foyer was filled with people. His lawyers, his publicist, members of the company board. 3 different news crews who had somehow talked their way past security. Everyone started talking at once. Jonathan, we need a statement. The stock is fluctuating. We have to address. The police want to schedule a formal interview. Mr. Sterling, can you confirm that Victoria Hayes? Jonathan held up his hand. Silence fell. One at a time, he said. And someone get me coffee. It's going to be a long day. The hours that followed were a blur of meetings, interviews, and legal consultations. Jonathan learned that Victoria and Marcus had been formally charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. The vial of poison had been tested and matched a compound used in industrial applications, nearly undetectable in small doses. The forged medical records had been traced back to 3 doctors who were now facing their own criminal charges. Victoria apparently was not talking. She had hired the most expensive defense attorney in the city and was claiming that she was the victim of an elaborate frame-up. She's saying the maid did it, Jonathan's lawyer explained. She's saying Amara Jenkins was trying to steal from the estate and fabricated everything to cover her tracks. Jonathan felt rage burn through his chest. That's insane. It's desperate. Her attorney knows the case is unwinnable, but Victoria is refusing to accept a plea deal. She genuinely believes she can convince a jury that she's innocent. Can she? The lawyer hesitated. The recording is damning. Her own voice clearly audible discussing the murder of your son. Even the best defense attorney in the world can't spin that. Good. I want her to rot. She will. Both of them will. Marcus apparently was more cooperative. He had already agreed to testify against Victoria in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed he had only been involved for the money, that he hadn't known about the plan to harm Ethan until it was too late. Jonathan didn't believe him. But it didn't matter. The evidence was solid. The recording was public. And Victoria Hayes was going to spend the rest of her life in prison. The media, predictably, was having a field day. Billionaire returns from the dead. Fiancé's murder plot, exposed by family Maid. The invisible woman who saved the Sterling dynasty. That last headline made Jonathan pause. The story of Amara Jenkins had captured the public's imagination in a way no one had anticipated. Reporters were digging into her background, interviewing her neighbors, tracking down anyone who had ever known her. They painted her as a hero, a working-class woman who had risked everything to save a billionaire and his son, a symbol of integrity in a world corrupted by greed. Jonathan watched the coverage with mixed feelings. On one hand, Amara deserved the recognition. She had earned every ounce of praise being heaped upon her. On the other hand, he knew she would hate it. Amara didn't want fame. She didn't want attention. She had spent her entire life in the shadows, and being thrust into the spotlight was probably the last thing she wanted. He tried calling her that afternoon. No answer. He tried again the next day. Still nothing. On the third day, he drove to her apartment. The building looked different in daylight. Smaller somehow. More worn. Jonathan parked his rental car and walked up the stairs to the second floor. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. "Amara, it's Jonathan. I just want to talk." Silence. He was about to leave when the door cracked open. Amara looked exhausted. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Jonathan had never seen it down before, and she was wearing a faded sweater instead of her usual uniform. "Mr. Sterling, can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped back to let him enter. The apartment was different than he remembered. Cleaner, if that was possible. But there were boxes stacked in the corner, and the photographs that had lined the walls were gone. "You're packing," Jonathan said. "I'm leaving." He turned to face her. "Leaving where?" "Does it matter?" Amara walked to the small kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. "My face is on every news channel in the country. Reporters are camped outside my building. My neighbors are selling interviews to tabloids. I can't stay here." "Then come work for me, officially. I'll give you a job, a real job with a salary and benefits and—" "No." The word was flat. Final. Jonathan stared at her. "Why not?" Amara set down her glass and turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. "Because that's not who I am," she said. "I'm not your employee, Mr. Sterling. I'm not your charity case. I'm not some feel-good story you tell at dinner parties to make yourself look better. I never said—" "You didn't have to. I've seen it 1,000 times. Rich people get in trouble, poor people save them, and suddenly they want to adopt us like stray dogs." Her voice hardened. "I don't need to be adopted. I don't need to be saved. I did what I did because it was right, not because I expected a reward." Jonathan felt the words hit him like punches. She was right. He had come here with a savior complex, thinking he could fix her life the same way she had fixed his. But that wasn't what she needed. That wasn't what she wanted. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You're right. I'm doing it again." Amara's expression softened slightly. "Doing what?" "Seeing what I want to see instead of what's actually there." He sat down on her couch, the same couch where he had recovered from the poison, where he had watched the news announce his death, where he had planned his resurrection. "You told me once that I should pay attention, that the people closest to me were the ones holding the knife, that the only person who tried to save me was someone I never bothered to notice." Amara nodded slowly. "I'm trying to notice now," Jonathan continued. "But I'm doing it wrong. I'm trying to make you into something you're not, because I don't know how else to say thank you." "You don't have to say thank you. You already did." "It's not enough. It will never be enough." Jonathan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You saved my son Amara. You saved my life, and I don't know how to live with that debt." Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down across from him in the same wooden chair she had used when they were planning the operation. "You want to know how to repay me?" "Yes." Then don't forget. Jonathan frowned. Forget what? What it felt like to be invisible. What it felt like to have everyone ignore you. What it felt like to be so desperate that you trusted a woman who smiled wrong. Amara held his gaze. You're going to go back to your life, your company, your money, your power. And eventually, this whole thing is going to feel like a bad dream. You'll tell the story at parties and people will gasp, and then everyone will move on. She leaned forward. Don't move on. Don't forget. Every day for the rest of your life, remember that the person who saved you was someone the world told you didn't matter. And then look around and find the other people the world is ignoring. The cleaners, the servers, the drivers, the workers who make your life possible without ever being seen. Her voice dropped. See them. Acknowledge them. Treat them like human beings. That's how you repay me. Jonathan felt something shift in his chest, something permanent. I will, he said. I promise. Amara studied his face for a long moment, then she nodded once. Okay, I believe you. They sat in silence for a while, not uncomfortable, just two people who had been through something together and didn't need words to acknowledge it. Finally, Jonathan spoke. Where will you go? My sister lives in Georgia. Small town, no reporters, nobody who cares about billionaires or scandals. I'll stay with her until things quiet down. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll find another house to clean. Maybe I'll do something different. She almost smiled. I've always wanted to learn how to paint. You should. You'd be good at it. Amara raised an eyebrow. You don't know that? No, but I have a feeling. She laughed a real laugh, warm and unexpected. It was the first time Jonathan had ever heard her laugh. You're strange, Mr. Sterling. Jonathan. What? My name is Jonathan. You can use it. Amara considered this. I'll think about it. Jonathan stood. It was time to go. They both knew it. There's one more thing, he said. Your son, Marcus. Amara's expression tightened. What about him? I spoke to my lawyers this morning. They reviewed his case. There are grounds for an appeal, procedural errors, inadequate representation. They think they can get his sentence reduced, maybe even overturned. Amara's face went very still. You did what? I asked them to look into it. They said, I didn't ask you to do that. I know. But you mentioned him what happened, how you blamed yourself, and I thought, you thought you could fix it. Amara's voice was sharp now. You thought you could throw money at my problems and make them go away. That's not... Stop. She held up her hand. Just stop. Jonathan fell silent. Amara took a breath, then another. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled. My son made choices. Bad choices. He has to live with the consequences. That's how the world works. She paused. But if your lawyers really think there's a case, if they really think the system failed him, then I'll listen. Not because I want your charity, but because my son deserves a fair chance, even if he made mistakes. Jonathan nodded. I'll have them contact you. Everything will go through you. You make the decisions. Amara studied him again, that searching look like she was trying to see beneath the surface. You're learning, she said finally. Slowly. But you're learning. I had a good teacher. Amara didn't smile, but something in her eyes softened. Goodbye, Jonathan. She used his name. It felt like a victory. Goodbye, Amara, and thank you for everything. He walked to the door, then paused. If you ever need anything at all, you know how to reach me. I know. And if you decide you don't want to paint, the job offer stands, not as charity, as partnership. Amara raised an eyebrow. Partnership. Someone who notices things the way you do. That's not a maid, Amara. That's a strategist. And I could use a strategist who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. For a moment, Amara said nothing. Then she shook her head slowly. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." Jonathan opened the door and stepped into the hallway. He looked back one last time. Amara stood in the doorway. Her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "Take care of your son," she said. "That's the only thing that matters now." "I will." The door closed. Jonathan walked down the stairs and out into the sunlight. The world looked different than it had 2 weeks ago. Brighter somehow. Fuller. He had his son back. He had his life back. He had a second chance that most people never got. And somewhere in a small apartment, a woman who had been invisible her whole life was finally being seen. The drive home took longer than usual. Traffic. Reporters camped outside the mansion gates. The chaos of a story that still hadn't finished unfolding. But Jonathan didn't mind. He used the time to think, to plan, to figure out what came next. When he finally pulled into the driveway, Ethan was waiting on the front steps. The boy ran to the car before Jonathan could even turn off the engine. He threw his arms around his father's waist and held on tight. "I thought you weren't coming back," Ethan said. "I told you I would always come back." "I know, but I was still scared." Jonathan knelt down so they were eye to eye. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and I want you to remember it forever. Can you do that?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Being scared is okay. Being sad is okay. Having bad things happen is okay." Jonathan put his hands on his son's shoulders. "What matters is what you do after. You keep going, you keep trying. You find the people who love you, and you hold on to them. And you never, ever let anyone tell you that you don't matter." Ethan's eyes were wide. "Like the cleaning lady." Jonathan smiled. "Her name is Amara, and yes, exactly like her. She was scared too, but she kept going anyway. And because she did, we're both here right now. She's a hero. Yes, she is." Ethan threw his arms around Jonathan's neck. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, buddy. More than anything in the world." They stood there in the driveway, father and son, while the sun set behind the mansion that had almost become a tomb. Inside the house was still a crime scene. There were still reporters at the gates and lawyers in the study and 1,000 problems waiting to be solved. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, Jonathan Sterling was holding his son. And that was everything. 6 months passed. The world moved on the way it always does. New scandals replaced old ones. New headlines buried the story of the billionaire who came back from the dead. The reporters who had camped outside Jonathan's gates eventually packed up their vans and drove away, chasing the next tragedy, the next sensation. But for Jonathan Sterling, time moved differently. He measured it in small moments. Ethan's first full night of sleep without a nightmare. The first morning his son laughed at the breakfast table. The first time Ethan mentioned Catherine without crying, just a quiet memory shared over pancakes about how his mother used to burn the toast every Sunday. "She was really bad at cooking," Ethan said, grinning. "But she always tried." "She did," Jonathan agreed. "She never gave up on anything." The mansion felt different now. Jonathan had considered selling it. Too many memories, too much pain, but in the end, he decided to stay. This was where Catherine had lived. This was where Ethan had been born. This was home, despite everything that had happened. But he made changes. The office where Victoria had plotted his death was converted into a playroom for Ethan. The master bedroom was renovated, every trace of Victoria's presence erased. New furniture, new paint, new beginnings. Jonathan also changed the staff. Not because he blamed them. Most of them had been as deceived as he was, but because he wanted people around him who understood what really mattered. He hired a new head of security, a woman named Patricia, former military, who had 3 kids of her own and understood that protecting Ethan was more than a job. He hired a new housekeeper, a man named David who had worked in hospitals for 20 years before switching careers and who treated every member of the household from Jonathan down to the gardeners, with the same respect. And he created a new position, one that had never existed in the Sterling household before. Chief of Staff. The job was offered to Amara Jenkins. She refused it 3 times. The first time she said she wasn't qualified. The second time she said she didn't want to be anyone's token diversity hire. The third time, she simply hung up the phone. Jonathan drove to Georgia. Amara's sister lived in a small town outside Atlanta, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. Jonathan felt the stares as he walked down the main street, a man in an expensive suit who clearly didn't belong. He found Amara sitting on her sister's porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the sunset. "You're persistent," she said when she saw him. "I'll give you that." "You said you'd think about it." "I did think about it. The answer is still no." Jonathan sat down on the porch steps uninvited. Amara didn't tell him to leave. "Can I ask why?" he said. Amara was quiet for a moment. The evening light painted her face in shades of gold and amber. "Because I spent my whole life cleaning up after rich people," she said finally. "I watch them make messes and walk away. I watch them treat other human beings like furniture. And I told myself that one day I would be done with all of it. This would be different." "Would it?" Amara turned to look at him. "You're offering me a job because I saved your life. Because you feel guilty. Because you want to prove to yourself that you're not like the other rich people I've worked for. That's not—" "Let me finish." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "I know you mean well, Jonathan. I do. But meaning well isn't enough. If I take this job, I become your conscience. Your proof that you've changed. Your insurance policy against being the person you used to be." She shook her head. "I won't be anyone's insurance policy. I won't be the black woman in the room who makes you feel better about yourself. If I work with you, and I mean with you, not for you, it has to be because you actually need what I bring to the table, not because of what I represent." Jonathan sat with her words. They stung, but not because they were unfair. They stung because they were true. "You're right," he said. "I haven't been thinking about what you want. I've been thinking about what I want, what makes me feel better." That's progress, admitting it. It doesn't feel like progress. It never does. They sat in silence as the sun dropped below the horizon. Fireflies began to emerge, tiny sparks of light dancing through the twilight. "What do you want?" Jonathan asked. "Not what I'm offering, not what you think you should want. What do you actually want?" Amara considered the question for a long time. "I want my son out of prison," she said quietly. "I want him to have a chance to rebuild his life. I want to be there when he walks out of those gates and see the look on his face when he realizes it's not over for him. The appeal is moving forward. My lawyers think—" "I know, they've been in touch." Amara paused. "Thank you for that, even though I didn't ask for it." "You're welcome, even though you didn't ask for it." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "What else?" Jonathan asked. "What else do you want?" Amara took a breath. "I want to matter, not as a symbol, not as a story, as a person who makes decisions and has power and can change things." She looked at him directly. "I've spent 43 years being invisible, watching, listening, noticing things that other people miss, and I'm tired of using those skills to clean up messes I didn't make. Bye. Then use them to prevent the messes in the first place." "That's a nice slogan. What does it actually mean?" Jonathan leaned forward. "It means I'm offering you a real job. Not a title, not a PR move, a seat at the table where decisions are made. A voice that gets heard even when it's inconvenient. A salary that reflects what you're actually worth, not what society has decided people like you should earn." He paused. "I'm also offering you something else. Something I should have offered from the beginning." "What?" "Equity, ownership, a piece of Sterling Industries that belongs to you, not because I'm being generous, but because you've already proven you're smarter and more observant than half my board of directors." Amara stared at him. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "The board will never approve it." "The board approved Victoria Hayes. They don't get to lecture me about judgment." Jonathan held her gaze. "I almost died because I was surrounded by people who told me what I wanted to hear. I almost lost my son because I trusted the wrong voices. I'm not making that mistake again." He extended his hand. "I need someone who will tell me the truth even when I don't want to hear it. I need someone who sees what everyone else misses. I need a partner, not an employee." He paused. "I need you, Amara. Not your symbolism. You." Amara looked at his hand for a long moment. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "things are going to change. The way you run your company, the way you treat your workers, the way you think about power and money and responsibility. I know. It's going to be uncomfortable. For you, for your friends, for everyone who benefits from the way things have always been. I know. And if I see something wrong, if I see you sliding back into old patterns, old blindnesses, I'm going to call you out. Publicly, if necessary. I'm counting on it." Amara studied his face. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it. She reached out and took his hand. "Okay," she said. "Let's see what happens." The next 12 months were a revolution. Not a loud one, not the kind that makes headlines or sparks protests, but a revolution nonetheless. Amara Jenkins joined Sterling Industries as chief of staff, and within a week she had turned the company upside down. She started with the workers. The cleaners, the security guards, the cafeteria staff, the people who kept the machine running but never appeared in annual reports. She met with them individually, learned their names, listened to their concerns. "This woman works 14-hour shifts and can't afford childcare," Amara reported to Jonathan after her first week. "This man has been with the company for 20 years and makes less than your executive assistants. This team hasn't had a raise in 6 years because their manager keeps the budget surplus as a bonus for himself." Jonathan listened, and then he acted. Wages were restructured. Benefits were expanded. The manager who had been hoarding bonuses was fired and replaced with someone Amara had personally vetted. The changes weren't popular with everyone. Some board members grumbled about costs. Some executives complained about interference. One particularly vocal shareholder demanded to know why a former maid was being allowed to influence company policy. Jonathan invited him to a meeting. "This former maid," Jonathan said calmly, "saved my life and my son's life while you were playing golf and counting your dividends. She has more integrity in her little finger than this entire boardroom combined. If you have a problem with her authority, the door is right there." The shareholder didn't use the door, but he stopped complaining. Amara's influence extended beyond the company. She convinced Jonathan to fund a scholarship program for the children of service workers, housekeepers, janitors, groundskeepers, the invisible army that made wealthy lives possible. She established a legal fund for workers who couldn't afford representation. She created a training program that helped domestic staff transition into other careers if they wanted to. "You're spending a fortune," Jonathan's CFO observed during a quarterly review. "I'm investing in people," Jonathan replied. "The returns are just harder to measure." The CFO looked skeptical, but he didn't argue. Meanwhile, the trial of Victoria Hayes ground toward its conclusion. It lasted 4 months. 4 months of testimony, evidence, cross-examination, and media spectacle. Victoria maintained her innocence throughout her expensive attorneys, spinning elaborate theories about frame-ups and conspiracies. The jury didn't buy it. The recording was played in court, Victoria's own voice clear and unmistakable, discussing the poison, the forged documents, the plan to murder a 6-year-old boy. The vial was introduced as evidence, its contents confirmed by 3 independent laboratories. The doctors who had falsified Jonathan's medical records testified against her in exchange for reduced sentences. Marcus Webb testified too. He painted himself as a reluctant accomplice, a man who had been manipulated by a master manipulator. The jury didn't fully believe him either, but his testimony corroborated the prosecution's case. Victoria was convicted on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery, a dozen other charges that added up to a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Jonathan attended the sentencing hearing. He sat in the gallery watching as Victoria was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. She looked different than he remembered, older, somehow diminished. The confidence that had once made her so compelling was gone, replaced by something brittle and desperate. She saw him watching. Their eyes met. Jonathan expected to feel satisfaction, vindication, the sweet taste of justice served. Instead, he felt nothing. Victoria Hayes had tried to kill him. She had tried to kill his son. She had manipulated his grief and exploited his loneliness and turned his home into a crime scene. But she wasn't worth his hatred. She wasn't worth his energy. She was just a woman who had made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. He had better things to do with his life than hate her. The judge delivered the sentence. Victoria's attorneys objected. Victoria herself said nothing, just stared straight ahead with an expression of frozen disbelief. Then it was over. Jonathan stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Amara was waiting for him outside. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Empty," Jonathan admitted. "I thought I would feel something more. Relief, maybe. Closure." "Closure is a myth," Amara said. "It's something people invented to make themselves feel better about things that can't be undone." She fell into step beside him as they walked toward the parking lot. "What matters isn't closure. It's what you do next." "What do I do next?" "You go home. You hug your son. You keep building the life you almost lost." She paused. "And you keep remembering." "Remembering what?" "That you're one of the lucky ones. Most people who get poisoned by people they trust don't come back from the dead. Most kids whose stepmothers want them gone don't have someone watching out for them." Amara stopped walking and turned to face him. "You got a second chance, Jonathan. Don't waste it." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I won't," he said. "I promise." 3 months later, Amara got her own second chance. Her son Marcus was released from prison on a technicality. The procedural errors Jonathan's lawyers had identified were enough to overturn the conviction. A new trial was scheduled, but the prosecution declined to pursue it. The evidence, they said, was insufficient. Amara drove to the prison alone. She didn't tell anyone she was going, didn't want cameras or reporters or well-wishers. This moment was hers, and hers alone. She waited outside the gates for 3 hours, watching the sun move across the sky. When the door finally opened and Marcus walked out, she barely recognized him. He was 27 now, 5 years older than when he had gone in. His face was harder, his eyes more guarded. But when he saw his mother standing there, something broke open in his expression. "Mama!" Amara ran to him. She held him the way she had when he was small, when she could still protect him from the world. She held him and cried, and didn't care who saw. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything." "I know, baby. I know. I messed up. I messed everything up." "You did." Amara pulled back and took his face in her hands. "But it's not over. You hear me? It's not over. You made mistakes. You paid for them. Now you get to decide what comes next." Marcus's eyes were wet. "I don't know how to do that. I don't know who I am anymore." "Then we'll figure it out together." Amara smiled through her tears. "That's what family does." She took her son home, not to the small apartment she had lived in before, that was gone, now sold to pay for legal fees that were eventually refunded. She took him to a new place, a small house on the outskirts of the city that she had purchased with her own money. Her money. Earned, not given. Marcus stayed with her for 6 months. He struggled at first, nightmares, anxiety, the difficulty of adjusting to a world that had moved on without him. But slowly, day by day, he started to rebuild. He got a job at a non-profit organization that helped formerly incarcerated people find employment. He started attending community college, studying criminal justice, with plans to become an advocate for prison reform. He met a woman named Keisha, who didn't care about his past, only about who he was trying to become. Amara watched her son come back to life. And she realized that this moment, this second chance, was worth everything she had risked. Jonathan visited them once about 4 months after Marcus's release. He brought Ethan with him. The boy had grown in the year since everything happened, taller, more confident, with a smile that came easier than it used to. "This is my friend Amara," Jonathan told Ethan. "Remember I told you about her?" Ethan nodded seriously. "You're the lady who saved us." Amara knelt down to his level. "I'm the lady who did what was right. That's all. Daddy says you're a hero. Daddy gives me too much credit. He also says you're the smartest person he knows." Amara looked up at Jonathan. "Did he now?" Jonathan shrugged. "It's true." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you. It's a drawing." Amara unfolded it carefully. 3 figures holding hands, a tall man, a small boy, and a woman with dark skin and kind eyes. Above them, in crayon letters, was written, "Thank you for bringing Daddy back." Amara's throat tightened. "It's beautiful," she said. "I'm going to keep it forever." Ethan beamed. "I knew you'd like it. I'm very good at drawing." "You are. You're very talented." The boy ran off to explore the house, leaving Jonathan and Amara alone on the porch. "He talks about you all the time," Jonathan said. "The cleaning lady who saved us. He's turned you into a legend." "Kids exaggerate." "Not about this." Jonathan sat down on the porch steps. "He has nightmares sometimes. Not as often as before, but they still come. And when they do, he tells me about the time when everything was scary and the cleaning lady made it okay again." Amara sat down beside him. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Really?" Jonathan considered the question. "Better," he said. "Most days. Some days I still wake up and expect to see Victoria lying beside me. Some days I still check my medication 3 times before I take it. But it's getting easier. That's good. How about you?" Amara looked out at the small yard, where Marcus was now playing with Ethan, teaching the boy how to throw a football. "I'm happy," she said. "I didn't think I'd ever say that. But I am. You deserve to be. So do you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, one grown, one small, play together in the afternoon sun. "I've been thinking," Jonathan said eventually, "about what you told me, about not forgetting. And I haven't forgotten, not for a single day." He paused. "The Sterling Foundation is launching a new initiative next month, a program to provide legal representation for domestic workers who face workplace abuse. We're calling it the Jenkins Initiative." Amara turned to look at him. "You named it after me." "It was Ethan's idea, actually. He said we should name it after the person who taught us to see people we used to ignore." Amara's eyes glistened. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. That's why I wanted to." She shook her head slowly. "You're a strange man, Jonathan Sterling." "So I've been told." A year later, Amara stood at a podium in front of 300 people. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala, the same event that had once been a stage for Victoria's ambitions, had been transformed into something different. Instead of celebrating wealth and power, it now celebrated the people who made wealthy lives possible. The honorees weren't executives or philanthropists. They were housekeepers, nannies, groundskeepers, cooks, workers who had spent their lives in service and were finally being recognized for their contributions. Amara had been asked to give the keynote address. She looked out at the crowd, the mixture of wealthy donors and working-class honorees, the journalists and the curious, the powerful and the invisible, and took a breath. "I spent 44 years being invisible," she began. "Cleaning houses, serving meals, watching people talk about me like I wasn't in the room. I learned to notice things that other people missed because noticing was the only power I had." She paused. "A year and a half ago, I used that power to save a man's life. I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I saw a crime that no one else was looking for. And I made a choice to speak up, even though speaking up could have cost me everything." She looked at Jonathan, who was sitting in the front row with Ethan beside him. "People call me a hero. I'm not. I'm just a woman who refused to look away. A woman who decided that some things matter more than safety, more than security, more than staying invisible." Her voice strengthened. "But here's the thing about being invisible. It gives you clarity. When no one is watching you, you can watch everyone else. You see the truth that people try to hide. You see the kindness and the cruelty, the generosity and the greed." She looked out at the crowd. Every person in this room has people in their lives who are invisible to them. The woman who cleans your office at night, the man who parks your car, the people who make your life possible while you're busy living it. She leaned forward. "See them. Learn their names. Treat them like the human beings they are. Because one day you might need someone like me. And you'd better hope that when that day comes, you've earned their loyalty." The room was silent. Jonathan Sterling almost died because he trusted the wrong person. His son almost died because the wrong person thought she could get away with murder. The only reason they're both alive today is because someone who was supposed to be invisible chose to be seen. She took a breath. "I'm not asking you to be heroes. I'm asking you to be human. To notice the people you've been trained to ignore. To treat them with the dignity they deserve, not because you might need them someday, but because it's right." She stepped back from the podium. "That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening." The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation. Amara stood at the podium, accepting it, feeling for the first time in her life that she truly belonged. Jonathan found her afterward in a quiet corner of the ballroom. "That was incredible," he said. "It was terrifying." Amara shook her head. "I don't know how you do this. Stand up in front of people and talk like you know what you're doing." "I don't know what I'm doing. I just pretend better than most." Amara laughed. "I have something for you," Jonathan said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "It's official as of this morning." Amara opened the envelope. Inside was a stock certificate, her name printed clearly at the top, representing a 2% ownership stake in Sterling Industries. "This is too much," she said. "It's not enough. It's nowhere close to enough." Jonathan met her eyes. "You saved my life. You saved my son. You changed the way I see the world. A piece of paper with numbers on it doesn't begin to cover what I owe you." Amara looked at the certificate for a long moment. "I didn't do it for this," she said quietly. "I know. That's exactly why you deserve it." She folded the certificate and slipped it back into the envelope. "Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Amara, for everything." They stood together in the quiet corner, two people who had been through something that most people would never understand. A billionaire and a maid. A man who had been invisible in plain sight, and a woman who had been invisible by design. Both of them finally seen. Later that night, Jonathan sat in Ethan's room watching his son sleep. The nightlight cast soft green shadows across the wall, dinosaurs still after all this time. Catherine had picked it out. Ethan had never wanted to change it. Jonathan thought about everything that had happened. The poison, the betrayal, the closet where Amara had pulled him to safety, the basement where he had almost died, the gala where he had walked back into his own life. He thought about Victoria rotting in a prison cell and felt nothing. He thought about Catherine buried in the cemetery across town and felt everything. He thought about Amara standing at a podium in front of hundreds of people finally being heard. And he thought about Ethan, his son, the reason all of it had mattered. "Daddy." Jonathan blinked. Ethan was awake, looking up at him with sleepy eyes. "Hey, buddy, I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I was just pretending to be asleep." Ethan yawned. "What are you thinking about?" "Lots of things. You, your mom, Amara, the future." "Is the future going to be good?" Jonathan considered the question. A year ago, he wouldn't have known how to answer. A year ago, the future had looked like nothing but darkness. But now, "Yeah," he said, "I think it's going to be good. Because we have each other. Because we have each other. And because we have people who love us. And because we learned something important." "What did we learn?" Jonathan smiled. "We learned that the people who save you aren't always the ones you expect. Sometimes they're the ones you never noticed. The ones who were invisible." He brushed the hair from Ethan's forehead. "And we learned that seeing people, really seeing them, is the most important thing you can do." Ethan nodded seriously. "Amara taught us that." "She did. She's my friend." "She's mine too." Ethan's eyes drifted closed. "Daddy." "Yeah, buddy. I'm glad you didn't die." Jonathan's heart clenched. "Me too, buddy. Me too." He sat there for a long time, watching his son sleep, listening to the quiet sounds of a house that had finally become a home again. The world outside was still full of danger. There would always be people like Victoria. People who saw others as obstacles or opportunities rather than human beings. There would always be greed and betrayal and pain. But there would also always be people like Amara. People who chose to see. People who chose to act. People who risked everything for what was right, not because they expected a reward, but because they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't. Jonathan Sterling had been given a second chance. He had been saved by someone the world had taught him to ignore. He would never forget that lesson. He would never stop seeing the invisible, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure that no one else had to be invisible either. Outside the window, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. A new day, a new beginning. Jonathan stood, kissed his son's forehead, and walked out of the room. The story wasn't over. It was never really over. But for the first time in a very long time, Jonathan Sterling was ready for whatever came next. Because he finally understood the truth that had been in front of him all along, the truth that Amara Jenkins had taught him with her courage and her clarity and her refusal to look away. The people who matter most are often the ones we fail to see. And the moment we start seeing them is the moment everything changes.